It's embarrassing. If we are going to be together, she have to wear her wig. She's not gonna go with her shorts.
I'm hurt, and now I feel ugly, and I feel unwanted and unloved.
You have to be wearing your wig when we are meeting my friends or meeting people.
Danny was talking to another girl on social media. At the same time, he was talking to me. Be honest, because I will walk out if you're not.
You know that moment when the air in the room changes, and you can almost hear hearts breaking in real time? That's exactly what happened the second Lisa peeled off her wig in that hotel hallway, her scalp aching, her nerves shot, and Daniel's face twisting into something so cold and sharp it could cut glass. He didn't even try to hide it. His eyes went wide, his lips curled, and for a split second, you could see every ounce of judgment he'd been holding back come pouring out, raw and unfiltered. Lisa, standing there exposed, her real hair finally breathing after days of sweat and glue, looked like she'd been slapped, and honestly, it hurt to watch. The silence that followed was so heavy, you could almost feel it pressing down on your chest. And in that pause, you could see Lisa's confidence drain away, replaced by a cocktail of shame, regret, and something dangerously close to heartbreak. Welcome to 90 Day Scoop Us. I'm Aliva, and if you've ever wondered how fast a relationship can go from sweet to sour, you're about to find out. Hit that subscribe button and drop your hottest take in the comments, because this story is about to get messier than a hotel bathroom after a breakup. Lisa's hands were still trembling as she tried to read Daniel's expression, searching for any sign of reassurance, but all she got was a wall of icy silence. Daniel didn't reach for her, didn't offer a smile, didn't even pretend to be supportive. Instead, he stared at her like she'd broken some unspoken rule, and the message was clear. This was not the woman he thought he'd signed up for. Lisa's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing with every insecurity she'd ever tried to bury, and for a moment, she looked like she wanted to disappear right there in the hallway. The tension was thick enough to choke on, and you could almost hear the echo of every time Daniel had told her he loved her, now ringing hollow in the face of something as simple, as human, as her natural hair. What makes this moment so brutal isn't just Daniel's reaction, but the way Lisa tries to hold herself together, forcing a shaky smile, pretending she's not devastated, even as her eyes fill with tears she refuses to let fall. She's been holding on to this relationship like it's her last lifeline, bending over backward to meet Daniel's expectations, hiding parts of herself she's scared he won't accept. And now, in one split second, all that effort feels wasted. Daniel's disgust isn't just about hair, it's about control, about power, about the unspoken rules he's been laying down since day one. Lisa's left wondering if anything between them was ever real, or if she's just another step on Daniel's ladder to a better life. And here's where things get even more complicated. Because Lisa isn't the only one with secrets. She's been hiding her own past, tiptoeing around the truth, afraid that if Daniel knew everything, he'd walk away. But Daniel's got his own agenda. And the more you watch, the more you start to question what he's really after. Is it love, or is it something else entirely? The stakes couldn't be higher. Lisa's risking her heart, her dignity, and maybe even her future. All for a man who can't even look her in the eye when she's at her most vulnerable. And as the silence stretches on, you can feel the weight of every red flag Lisa's ignored, every warning she's brushed aside, all coming back to haunt her in this one unforgettable moment. But if you think this is as bad as it gets, you're in for a wild ride. Because the secrets, the lies, and the power plays are only just getting started. What happens next will make you question everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and the price some people are willing to pay for a shot at happiness. Long before that hotel hallway showdown, Lisa's battle with her wig was already a war she was losing in private. Every morning started with the same ritual: glue, sweat, and a silent prayer that the hairpiece would stay put. That Daniel wouldn't notice the itching, the headaches, or the way her scalp burned under the weight of pretending. She'd stare at herself in the mirror, tugging at the edges, feeling the sting where the glue had fused to her skin, and wonder how much longer she could keep this up. The pain wasn't just physical, it was the ache of knowing that the man she loved only wanted the version of her that fit his fantasy, not the real woman underneath. Each time she caught her reflection, she saw the cracks in her own confidence, the way her smile faltered when she thought about what Daniel would say if he ever saw her without the wig. The fear was constant, gnawing at her, making her question if she was ever enough. Daniel's rules were never written down, but they might as well have been carved in stone. Long hair, perfect makeup, always smiling, never questioning his choices. He'd make little comments, sometimes a joke, sometimes a warning, about how much he loved her look, how important it was to keep up appearances, especially around his friends and family. If Lisa ever hinted at wanting to relax, to let her guard down, Daniel would shut it down with a dismissive wave or a cold stare. He was obsessed with the image they projected together, and Lisa felt the pressure every second they were in public. She learned to read his moods, to anticipate his reactions, to smooth over any rough edges before he even noticed. The cost was her own comfort, her own peace of mind, traded away for the hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd love her for who she was if she played the part well enough. Inside her head, Lisa's thoughts spun in circles. She'd tell herself that every couple has issues, that Daniel's demands were just part of the culture clash, that love means compromise. She'd replay his sweet words, the promises he made late at night, the way he'd hold her hand when no one was watching. But underneath the hope was a river of doubt, a voice whispering that she was losing herself piece by piece. She wondered if Daniel would ever accept her real hair, her real story, or if he'd walk away the second the illusion cracked. Sometimes she'd catch herself daydreaming about a life where she didn't have to hide, where she could breathe without fear, but those moments were fleeting, drowned out by the reality of Daniel's expectations. And yet, Lisa wasn't the only one with secrets. She'd been careful with her own truth, hiding parts of her past, skipping over details that might make Daniel question her loyalty. But Daniel was a mystery too, always dodging questions about his own history, changing the subject when things got too personal. There were messages on his phone she wasn't allowed to see, stories about other women that never quite added up, and friends who seemed to know more than they let on. The more Lisa tried to get close, the more Daniel pulled away, building walls she couldn't climb. It was a dance of half-truths and silent agreements, both of them pretending not to notice the cracks forming beneath their feet. What neither of them realized was that the pressure was building, and sooner or later, something had to give. Lisa's patience was wearing thin, her doubts growing louder, and Daniel's grip on the narrative was slipping. The next confrontation wouldn't be about hair or appearances, it would be about trust, honesty, and the real reasons they were together. And when that moment came, nothing would ever be the same. Lisa's phone buzzed with a video call from her daughter Faith, and for a moment, Lisa hesitated, her thumb hovering over the answer button as if she could delay the inevitable. When she finally picked up, Faith's face filled the screen, her eyes sharp and searching, already bracing for whatever new drama her mother was about to unload. The conversation started with small talk, but it didn't take long for Faith to cut through the pleasantries and get to the point. She wanted to know about the money, how much Lisa had sent, what Daniel was doing with it, and why her mother seemed so eager to bankroll a man she barely knew. Lisa tried to laugh it off, insisting that everything was fine, that Daniel was planning something special, but Faith wasn't buying it. She pressed harder, her voice rising with every unanswered question, and Lisa felt the familiar sting of guilt settle in her chest. The truth was, Daniel's grand gestures always came with a price tag, and Lisa was the one footing the bill. The parade he threw in her honor, the fancy dinners, the new clothes, every celebration was a reminder of how much she'd invested, not just emotionally, but financially. Daniel would flash a smile, shower her with compliments, and promise her the world. But when the check arrived, it was always Lisa who reached for her wallet. She told herself it was worth it, that love required sacrifice, but deep down, she knew she was paying for more than just gifts. She was buying Daniel's affection, his attention, his willingness to play the part of the perfect fiancé. Each transaction chipped away at her self-respect, but she clung to the hope that one day, Daniel would love her for who she was, not what she could provide. Faith's skepticism was relentless, her questions cutting through Lisa's defenses like a knife. She pointed out the obvious. If Daniel loved her, why did he need so much money? Why did he always have an excuse for why he couldn't contribute? Lisa tried to explain, to justify, to rationalize every red flag, but the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. She told Faith that Daniel was different, that he was grateful, that he made her feel special in ways no one else ever had. But Faith wasn't convinced, and neither was Lisa. Not really. The guilt gnawed at her, a constant reminder that she was risking everything for a man who might not be telling her the whole truth. Still, Lisa couldn't let go. She needed Daniel's approval, his validation, his promise that she was enough. She ignored the warnings, brushed aside the doubts, and convinced herself that every relationship had its challenges. Faith's voice echoed in her mind, a chorus of concern that grew louder with every unanswered question. But Lisa pushed it down, choosing hope over reality. She wanted to believe that Daniel was different, that their love was real, that the sacrifices she was making would pay off in the end. But as the call ended and Lisa stared at her reflection, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The money, the secrets, the constant need for reassurance, it all pointed to a truth she wasn't ready to face. And as she replayed the conversation in her mind, she realized that Faith wasn't the only one with doubts. Lisa's own instincts were screaming at her to pay attention, to stop ignoring the signs, to ask the questions she'd been too afraid to voice. Because somewhere in Daniel's past, there was a secret waiting to explode. A bombshell that would change everything she thought she knew about the man she was about to marry. Lisa's suspicions started as a whisper in the back of her mind. But now, they were impossible to ignore. Every time Daniel's phone buzzed, she felt a jolt of anxiety, her eyes darting to the screen, searching for a name she didn't recognize. There were late-night messages, quick glances at his notifications, and conversations that ended the second she walked into the room. Daniel always had an explanation, always brushed off her questions with a laugh or a kiss, but the unease kept growing. She'd heard rumors about his past, stories of other women, some American, some local, who'd fallen for his charm and ended up with nothing but empty promises. Lisa wanted to believe she was different, that their connection was real. But the evidence was piling up, and her trust was wearing thin. The secrets weren't all on Daniel's side. Lisa had her own history, a past she'd carefully edited for Daniel and his family. She'd told them what she thought they wanted to hear, skipping over the messy details, the relationships that didn't fit the story she was selling. When Daniel's uncle asked about her previous marriages, Lisa lied, downplaying her years with women, pretending it was a one-time thing instead of a defining part of her life. She hated the deception, hated the way it made her feel small and ashamed, but she was terrified that the truth would ruin everything. The guilt weighed on her, a constant reminder that she was building her future on a foundation of half-truths and omissions. Meeting Daniel's friends only made things worse. They greeted her with smiles and compliments, but there was something guarded in their eyes, a sense that they were keeping secrets of their own. When Lisa tried to ask about Daniel's past, the friends dodged her questions, changing the subject or offering vague reassurances that only made her more suspicious. They talked about how much Daniel's life had improved since meeting her, how grateful he was for her support, but their words felt rehearsed, like they were reading from a script. Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that they were protecting him, covering for him, making sure she didn't get too close to the truth. The more Lisa pushed, the more anxious she became. She replayed every conversation, every sideways glance, every awkward pause, searching for clues she might have missed. Her hope for honesty was desperate, almost frantic, as if the right question might finally break through Daniel's defenses and force him to come clean. But every time she thought she was getting close, Daniel would pull away, hiding behind charm and empty promises. Lisa's anxiety grew with each passing day, her dreams of a happy ending slipping further out of reach. Still, She couldn't let go. She needed answers, needed to know if the man she loved was really who he claimed to be. The tension between them was electric, a storm waiting to break, and Lisa knew that sooner or later, the truth would come out. She could feel it building, a confrontation on the horizon that would either shatter her illusions or finally set her free. And when that moment arrived, nothing would ever be the same for Lisa or Daniel. Lisa couldn't keep the questions bottled up any longer. The sting of Daniel's disgust over her real hair still burned in her memory, and the weight of every unanswered doubt pressed down on her chest as she finally cornered him in their hotel room. Her voice trembled, but she forced herself to look him in the eye, demanding to know why her natural self was so unacceptable, why he cared more about a wig than the woman underneath. Daniel's face hardened, his jaw set, and he launched into a practice routine, insisting she was overreacting, that it was all in her head, that he only wanted her to look her best for his friends and family. He spun her pain into a problem of her own making, twisting her words until she started to question her own reality. Every time she tried to explain how much it hurt, he'd cut her off, telling her she was being dramatic, that she was embarrassing him, that she should be grateful for his honesty. The more Lisa pushed, the more Daniel retreated behind a wall of excuses and half-truths. He accused her of not understanding his culture, of making a scene, of trying to sabotage their relationship over something as trivial as hair. When she pressed him about the money, about the other women, about the secrets he kept locked away on his phone, Daniel's answers grew slippery, his tone shifting from defensive to wounded. He played the victim, insisting he'd never do anything to hurt her, that she was the only one he wanted, that everyone else was just jealous of what they had. Lisa felt herself slipping, her confidence eroding under the weight of his manipulation, but somewhere deep inside, a spark of anger flared to life. Tears streamed down her face as she finally let herself feel the full force of her disappointment, her heartbreak, her exhaustion. She sobbed out the words she'd been holding back for weeks, telling Daniel how small he made her feel, how much she'd sacrificed, how desperately she wanted to believe in their love. For a moment, Daniel looked shaken, caught off guard by the rawness of her pain, but he quickly recovered, reaching for her hand and promising to do better, to be more understanding, to love her for who she was. But Lisa saw through the act. She saw the calculation in his eyes, the way he measured every word, the way he tried to pull her back in with empty promises and practiced apologies. When Daniel's friends joined them later that evening, the tension was impossible to ignore. Lisa tried to act normal, but her eyes darted between the men, searching for any sign of the truth. She asked them directly about Daniel's past, about the rumors, about the other women, and watched as they squirmed in their seats, exchanging nervous glances and stumbling over their answers. Their loyalty to Daniel was obvious, but so was their discomfort. They couldn't keep their story straight, couldn't look her in the eye, couldn't hide the fact that there was more going on than anyone wanted to admit. Lisa felt a strange sense of relief, as if the cracks in their facade finally proved what she'd suspected all along. But just when it seemed like the truth was about to come out, Daniel doubled down, insisting that Lisa was imagining things, that his friends were only trying to protect her, that there was nothing to worry about. He begged her to trust him, to let go of her doubts, to focus on their future together. Lisa wiped her tears, her voice steady for the first time in days, and told him she needed time to think, to decide if she could keep living in a world built on secrets and lies. The room fell silent, the tension thick and suffocating, and everyone knew that nothing would ever be the same. What Lisa didn't know was that the biggest shock was still waiting in the wings, a final twist that would turn everything upside down and force her to confront the truth she'd been running from since the day she met Daniel. Lisa's patience had finally snapped, and she wasn't about to let another night pass with her questions hanging in the air like a storm cloud. She sat across from Daniel's friends, her voice steady but her hands clenched tight in her lap, demanding straight answers about Daniel's past, about the women she'd heard whispers about the messages that always seemed to arrive at the worst possible moments. The friends shifted in their seats, their eyes darting to Daniel, then back to Lisa, their smiles fading as they realized she wasn't going to let this go. One tried to laugh it off, another mumbled something about Daniel being popular, but none of them could give her the reassurance she craved. Every vague answer, every awkward pause, every nervous glance only made Lisa more certain that she was right to be suspicious. Daniel sat beside her, his knee bouncing, his fingers tapping out a frantic rhythm on the table. He tried to cut in, to steer the conversation back to safer ground, but Lisa wouldn't let him. She pressed harder, her questions growing sharper, her tone more insistent. She wanted names, dates, proof that she wasn't just another mark in a long line of women who'd fallen for Daniel's charm. The friends grew more uncomfortable, their stories contradicting each other, their loyalty to Daniel wavering under the weight of Lisa's determination. Daniel's face grew pale, his confidence slipping as he realized he was losing control of the narrative. In that moment, something shifted inside Lisa. She saw the situation with new clarity, the way Daniel's affection always seemed to follow her bank transfers, the way his promises grew sweeter whenever she threatened to walk away. She realized that every grand gesture, every whispered "I love you," every tearful apology was part of a pattern, a cycle designed to keep her hooked, to keep her giving, to keep her hoping for a future that was never really hers to begin with. The relationship wasn't built on love or trust or even mutual respect. It was a transaction, plain and simple, and Lisa was the one paying the price. Daniel must have sensed the change in her, because he switched tactics in an instant. He reached for her hand, his voice soft and pleading, promising that things would be different, that he'd be honest from now on, that he'd never hurt her again. He painted a picture of a life together, full of happiness and security, if only she'd give him one more chance. But Lisa wasn't listening to his words anymore. She was watching his eyes, searching for the truth he'd never been able to say out loud. She saw the fear there, the desperation, the knowledge that his safety net was slipping away. The friends, sensing the shift, grew quiet, their earlier bravado replaced by a nervous silence. Lisa stood up, her resolve hardening with every step, and told Daniel she needed space, needed time to think, needed to decide if she could keep sacrificing her self-worth for a love that felt more like a business deal than a partnership. Daniel tried to follow her, tried to pull her back with promises and apologies, but Lisa kept walking, her head held high for the first time in weeks. What happens next will change everything, not just for Lisa and Daniel, but for everyone who's ever wondered what happens when the truth finally comes out, and the lies can't hold up any longer. Lisa's next move will leave shockwaves, and the fallout is going to be unforgettable. Lisa stood at the edge of the hotel balcony, the city lights flickering below her, the weight of her decision pressing down on her shoulders. For the first time since she landed in Nigeria, she felt the silence as a kind of freedom, not a punishment. She replayed every moment with Daniel, every promise, every excuse, every time she'd swallowed her doubts and told herself that love meant compromise. Now, with the truth laid bare and the mask finally off, she saw the cost of her denial in sharp relief. She'd given so much, her money, her pride, her sense of self, all for a man who couldn't love her without conditions, who saw her as a ticket to a better life rather than a partner to cherish. The pain was real, but so was the clarity that came with it. Inside, Daniel paced the room, his confidence gone, his voice small and uncertain as he tried to salvage what was left. He pleaded with Lisa, promising change, swearing that he'd never meant to hurt her, that he was only scared of losing her. But the power had shifted. Lisa wasn't begging for his approval anymore. She listened, but she didn't bend. She asked him the questions he'd always dodged, and when he tried to twist her words, she stood her ground. For every excuse, she had a memory of his coldness. For every apology, she remembered the sting of his demands. The dynamic between them had changed, and Daniel could feel it slipping through his fingers. Lisa's mind raced with what-ifs and regrets, but also with a new sense of possibility. She thought about her daughter's warnings, about the friends who tried to protect her, about the woman she used to be before she let someone else's expectations define her worth. She realized that love without honesty isn't love at all, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from the person you thought you couldn't live without. The cost of denial was too high, and she wasn't willing to pay it anymore. She packed her things in silence, her hands steady, her heart heavy, but resolute. As she closed the door behind her, Daniel watched her go, his future suddenly uncertain, his plans unraveling in real time. He called after her, but Lisa didn't look back. She stepped into the hallway, her head high, her spirit bruised but not broken. The unanswered questions lingered. Would Daniel find someone else to fill the void? Or would he finally face the truth about himself? Would Lisa ever trust again? Or would this heartbreak shape her forever? The story wasn't over, not by a long shot. And if you think this was the wildest twist 90 Day Fiance has to offer, you haven't seen anything yet. There's another couple on the brink, another secret about to explode, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Stick around, because the next story is about to raise the stakes even higher.